Yeah, you're excited, Rick. Um, good morning, everyone, and welcome to your Navigating Growth series, Expert Insights for SMEs. We're glad you could join us today for a Leveraging Our Technology for Growth session. And my name is Joanne Creevy, and I'll be your host for today's event. This is a limited five-part series we're running where every month we'll tackle a new business challenge that matters to you. Whether it's funding, pricing, compliance, technology, or hiring, we're here to give you practical advice that you can use to grow your business. So each session is going to be a little bit different. And today we're lucky to have Rick Williams, Head of Digital Transformation at Kenor, and Christina McGreevy, Head of Sales and Marketing, with us, who will be sharing their expert insights. And the best part, it's an Ask Me Anything session. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A as we go. And if you prefer to put them in anonymously, that's perfectly fine as well. I will pose these questions to Rick and Christina as they go through the discussion today. So I'll hand you over to the expert yourself, Rick, there, if you want to kick off. I don't know, Christina, if you have any particular question that you would like to kick off the session with.
Yeah, well, Rick, our opening question is, I suppose, how can technology help streamline the way you run your business? I've no doubt that you have lots of tips there. So,
Yeah, well, so before I get into addressing specific concerns, I think let me just explain something about general practical advice. So I think every organization, one useful thing to do, that's it's free. Just I think everyone needs to understand where they fit in a digital maturity model. So there's tons of free, you can Google it, organizational digital maturity assessment. There's tons of free questionnaires, but I'm going to simplify it today and basically say that organizations fall into one of three um, columns. Okay, so you're either crawling, you're walking, or you're running. And what I mean by that is crawling is relatively immature in the context of leveraging AI and just digital transformation in general. So an organization, you may fit into this bucket if you're not using AI at all, or if you're just using kind of the bare bones of it. So you're just using LLMs to proofread your emails or generate marketing copy for your website, or asking it to summarize meetings and things like that. That's you're still relatively immature in that sense. On the other end of the spectrum, you have organizations that are they're running, so they're developing agentic AI services. And without getting in the weeds on that, all agentic means is it's AI that does something for you. So an example of that, which is going to happen in the near future because everyone's working on agentic services. Imagine you're in ChatGPT. So here's the dream. Here's the near future, and you say, book me a flight to Brazil over the next month. And it comes back and it asks you, all right, give me your passport number and your credit card, and I'll do that for you. You give it your passport number and your credit card number, and it comes back and it says, all right, I booked you a flight to Brazil. I got you your accommodation. By the way, it's going to be 30 degrees, sunny the whole time you're there. So I know that you burn easily. So I've sent, had Amazon, there'll be a package waiting for you at the front desk. It's sun cream for you because I know you're going to burn. That. So a mature organization, they're already developing web services that enable those types of self-service. In the middle is you're starting to leverage machine learning, so you're starting to train models. Okay, so going back to Christine's question, a lot of my my perspectives today will focus on those first two, because I think everyone on this call will probably be crawling or starting to walk. Most companies in the world right now are crawling, by the way. So it's not necessarily a negative. It's just, again, in the context of every company in the world, most are crawling right now. Example of running would be OpenAI itself, where they're developing agentic technologies and services. So going back to Christina's question, the answer, if you're crawling right now, the best use of technology, I think, it depends on the industry you're in, but general purpose, most people are looking into tools like um, um, uh, meeting summarization tooling. I'm not going to name any vendors, but
Yeah.
you can just Google it. They summarize meetings. Um, um, other things to look at are like a data entry automation. So again, that's really particularly useful for bookkeeping, accounting, auto entry. And then the other thing to look at, again, low hanging fruit, would be aspects of workflow automation. So that would be I'd still classify that as crawling. Now, for the few of you that may identify as someone who's more mature, not yet running, but walking, some tools to look at would be fraud detection, automation around identifying bank transactions that look fraudulent, banking automation, banking web services, and development tools. So using modern technologies like Replit to quickly scaffold code based on a LLM prompt and stuff like that. So if you classify yourself as running, tooling to look at,
You're probably not in this
you're
webinar.
probably not in this webinar, this particular webinar, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Rick, no, that's really helpful, and some tools that people can look out for to start. And in terms of, I suppose, your expertise, Rick, what would be the next level up that people could do after they're working with like meeting summarization and everything, if they're looking to automate something or make something more lean in their business, where would you look to?
Okay. The funny, great question. The funny thing to look at, I think, is so every process, there's three key lenses to it: people, process, and technology. I'd say before you look at technology for, the turnkey solution that's going to fix all your problems, first look at your people and your business processes. Go through your business processes, map them out. You don't have to be an expert at flow charts and Visio, or it could be as simple as an Excel workbook where you have a business process that's row by row, like saying like, okay, we perform this step. It typically takes this long. It's done by this team. Go row by row. Look at your business processes, and I'd say kill or remove where you can, call business processes where it doesn't make sense to keep a step or keep a process. I think most clients that I've had in the past, or just generally, I think most will find that you are able to streamline a lot of your business by just taking an objective, very ruthless look at your business process. Say like, let's remove some of that, as much as like 30 to 50% of just general business. Because what happens is, over time, people are human, they make mistakes. So then little steps are added to a business process to mitigate risk. But what happens is that step gets executed for every single every single execution of that process in the future, and that adds up time. So I'd say look at that. Look at from the people perspective, look at, like, make sure that who is executing a business process even makes sense. Again, that's just practical advice. I'd look at those two things first, then I'd look at technology. So I'd look at first, I would look at ways to auto document business processes. So after you're happy with your clean business process, look at LLMs to help you document that process moving forward. You can take something like an Excel workbook that has just a column list of or a table of all your business processes. feed that into an LLM and say, hey, generate a flowchart for this. And, you can ask specifically, I would ask it for what's called it sounds silly. I didn't come up with the name, but it's called a mermaid.js flowchart. So just ask it for a flowchart. Again, I didn't come up with the name, but that will help document in a very programmatic way so that you don't have to spend, hours like documenting business processes. I'm a big believer in documentation, having things written down. I think once you have stuff like that written down, it's very impactful. Especially if you take a lean approach and you're looking to iteratively streamline the operation of your business. It's important to have that stuff to be able to audit yourself moving forward. But that's probably really really low hanging fruit in terms of how to go about methodically streamlining the business processes.
Yeah, and I suppose, Rick, that's great tips that you've shared there for anyone on the webinar that really doesn't know where to get started or anything. And I suppose like the primary concern that I think like most clients would have with something like that is how do they work in like cybersecurity when they're adopting AI or sharing their business information or anything? What do they have to be conscious of and what can they trust essentially? And I know that's a very broad question, so shoot me now if it's too broad.
No, it's a good question. So I'm not going to name any vendors, but let's just take that use case you brought up about summarizing meetings. Okay, so there's a few, you can Google it. There's a few popular vendors you can go with or solutions you can go with online. Look at the terms and conditions of you know of that service. Make sure that the data, understand where they're going to store the data that you send them. Send out an email to your company and explicitly say, because we do this at Core, but explicitly say, like, do not upload any client data or sensitive data to a LLM. It's a big no-no. So you need to be aware of where the data is stored. I can tell you a couple of them that I looked at in terms of deeply reading the terms and conditions. The way they make money is, when you invite people to those meetings, they're actually everybody you invite to that meeting goes into that company's CRM. So they're making money. Again, nothing in this world is free. If you're not paying for something, they're making data on, or sorry, they're making money on the data they're collecting from you or some analytics about like how you're doing something. So someone somewhere is buying information about how people schedule meetings or metadata around meetings and stuff like that. But yeah, so I'd say check the where the data is stored, and also like what are the specifics of what they're doing with your data. I can tell you if you're a Microsoft 365 customer or you're in the kind of Microsoft cloud sphere, Copilot's a really good solution. It is a little pricey, so relative to some of the other competitors out there. So one thing before you look at adopting Copilot for your organization, you have to be aware of the fact that the Copilot needs to be security trimmed. And what I mean by that is if you have a lot of information on your SharePoint, your OneDrive, your Exchange, if you don't configure it correctly, Copilot can index all that and return the answers. So be careful when you roll that out. There's a lot of guidance on this, but again, you need to the adoption to using or deploying something like Copilot to our organization needs to be done very methodically. Otherwise, what could happen is, Joanne could just ask Copilot like, what's Richard or what's Rick's salary? And because that's stored somewhere in SharePoint, like it would say, oh, his annual salary is blah 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 blah, and so you have to be careful and mindful of all that stuff. That's why it's not as easy as just flipping a switch for some of that stuff, because it has to be the content has to be security trimmed.
Rick, Can I ask a question there? Because you have really give the message that you have to be very cautious whenever you are, applying a new AA tool. What would you say advice? Would you go to an external consultant, or would you get an expert person into the business to look at what's the right, I suppose, vendors, as you mentioned there, for the business before you would start implementing any tools to your I suppose, business?
It depends on, I'll go back to that whole maturity model, which is why I had that whole opening spiel about but it depends on your comfort level. So if you're fairly comfortable, like you've dabbled with Grok and Claude and OpenAI's ChatGPT, and like you know what you're doing, you have, let's say you're kind of in that walking bucket, and you have an IT department that is knows what they're doing, for lack of a better phrasing. You're probably okay. But if you're speaking to the crawl, the less mature, I'd say absolutely. You need to, you know, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom on the, early morning call, but you need to speak with someone that understands when to use what in terms of like what each LLM is good for, and also just versus when to use generative AI, which is what LLMs are, versus when should you look at machine learning, because machine learning falls under the AI umbrella, but it's a subcategory. And again, general education for everybody that's on the webinar, you use machine learning whenever you need to do predictive analytics. So that's where you would feed it a database of information of, let's say, like your previous 5 years worth of client data from your CRM. And you'd say like, okay, predict, if this client is of this industry type and it is availing of these services, what do you think what's the what can I cross sell or upsell? Predict some logical cross selling and upselling, and also predict the client's predict their attrition rate, or their with the services that they have selected today, and in that industry, because you have the data to train the model. So it's just a matter of um, developing, training your own model to use it, ML to machine learning to do that.
Yeah, there's certainly a minefield there, Rick, of possibility. And I suppose it's that you've given a couple of tips there on how to mitigate risk and how to be careful with any of these elements. Would you say that that for any business that's just like I suppose, small enough senior team, how would they go about? Are they better to go and like reach out to a consultant to advise them on all of the pitfalls? Because even just in this short session, you've spoken about a couple of pitfalls that could be huge risk to businesses. Would you say that before you would engage in any of this yourself, that it's best to work with an expert in the field?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
look, so Christina, I'm going to be biased. I was a consultant for 10 years. So, but I will say that, like, if you're not sure, reach out to professional services anyway, because, a lot of them will do a discovery call, and with little to no obligation, and
Yeah.
at least, help you understand the risk, before any assessment or review is undertaken. But yeah, it's worth picking up the phone, or writing a quick email, just to again understand, because we can't, this is a 30-minute webinar, and I can't
I know.
possibly like cover like all the nuance to some of this, but it's worth the call for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just get some of that sort of free advice and a bit of, if nothing else, a little bit of direction, right? To understand what the risks may be that you may not even consider. And so hopefully no one has already employed Copilot and has given it free rein and access to their entire SharePoint. But yeah, thanks for that, Rick.
Yeah, sure.
Rick, we have a question here, and I suppose like maybe it's back to when you're planning for different tools in the business. Should you have a budget for that, and how would you know when you're overspending it, or is that back to sort of, I suppose, looking at the processes and the time, and then what time you can reduce, and looking at the overall was saving from the implementing the new tools then?
I think, yeah, that's another really good question. I think so. Everyone, well, not everyone, but I think again, if you're maybe starting out, your research and development budget, is going to be relatively small, right?
Yeah.
So you're whereas if you're starting to get more mature, you're walking in my whole bucket analogy thing. You may have more to spend on research and
Yeah.
development. So there's that. I'd say you should always carve out research and development funding, or at least look at that again. And actually, if you do a self-assessment and understand your level of digital maturity, I think you'll uncover that in conjunction to some hard just some hard looks at like how your P&L, see like how much do you invest in research and development. That'll kind of paint the picture of where you are. But in terms of spending, though, in terms of um, that piece, I think it's hard to say. It's hard to give like a target
Yeah.
for like percentage of revenue or anything like that,
Yeah.
because
Very
it's
individual.
totally contextual. But
Mm.
um, yeah,
It probably depends a lot on your industry as well, but I've no doubt that there will be some papers out there that would give a little bit of direction to people in terms of there'll be some industries that if they're not adopting tech and innovation and AI already, they'll be very quickly left behind, right, Rick? Whereas some other industries can afford to be that bit slower with getting it. But ultimately you're saying set yourself up for future proofing now, and look at what you need to invest and start planning for it one way or another. Is that
I
fair to
I
say?
have this, yeah, and I'd add, look, I have this sinking feeling. Again, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. It's not even 11 a.m. where we're having this conversation, but I have this sinking feeling that, again, the way I'm seeing artificial intelligence progress month over month,
Yeah.
if you're not investing in these things today, you have a risk of being acquired in the next 3 to 5 years by companies that did make the investment in the tech. Now, that's a very blanket statement,
Right.
because you're right. It depends on what industry you're in and stuff like that. But I mean, if you're investing in, again, if you're trying to increase your level of digital maturity, your leverage and usage of artificial intelligence, you're going to be much better positioned to automate business processes, improve margins, scale your business, which is that's the purpose of this webinar. Like you're able to do that through adoption of technology. I don't think we're at a place in time where you can turn a blind eye to that stuff anymore.
I'll share
That-
some links as well to supports and grants available, mostly through the local enterprise, but I'll share them in the chat as well. That might be helpful, or even going to speak to them about the first
Absolutely.
steps. So I'll share that as well. So thanks for that, Rick.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's great, Joanne, because if you're an EI client as well, there's some additional grants that you can get for research and development and for digitalization. So it's definitely worthwhile looking at what grants and supports are available. That's really interesting what you've said there, Rick, about businesses that if they're not looking at it now, that there's so many businesses that will just leapfrog past them completely, right? And so it's particularly if you're in a competitive industry, you really need to be focused on investing in this. Um,
There's
And
also,
I,
real quick, just for only
yeah,
because I'll forget if I don't interrupt you. Sorry.
That's
There's
okay.
also tax credits available for research and
yeah,
development too. So
Yeah.
it's not just grants. It's also, you can submit some of this stuff to revenue, and there's loads of criteria. You need to make sure the research and development that you're doing is novel, and obviously seek specific advice on that. But you can avail of tax credits for that as well.
Yeah, thanks for that tip as well. And then I suppose one thing that I think would be commonplace across all industries is team members being reluctant to adopt technology, Rick. How have you handled that in the past, or what tips would you give the people that are on here today?
It all goes back to change management. So you need to look at understanding change management, and in particular change management. If you're doing it right, it starts with empathy. You need to understand your um, what your users, or what the staff, or even external vendors, contractors, subcontractors, what they're going to go through when you implement a change. And if you can, try to preempt what their questions or what the business impact is going to be. So we talked a bit about, Joanne mentioned budget, and absolutely measure return on investment for every initiative that you're doing. I would argue that um, you should prioritize the work in your roadmap by obviously like business value, return on investment,
Right.
and measure that when you're done with the project. But I would also, you have to weigh that with the business risk and the impact to the organization. So all those three pillars should really influence your roadmaps for how you roll out things.
Okay, great. Joanne, have we had any other questions submitted?
yeah, there's been one there. Rick, I don't know if you can recommend, but any AI tools for bookkeeping that you would recommend? And there's also a question there as well. Does any automation there affect the quality as well of sort of producing or implementing automation to, say, for example, your bookkeeping?
Yeah. So if you're crawling, less mature, I'd say look at some of the data entry automation.
Yeah.
I think that's a low hanging fruit. That's again, I'm not
Yeah.
going to name any particular vendors, but you can do a quick Google search. One of them might sound exactly like auto entry, but like it's data entry. But yeah, I'd look at that. I'd look at looking for solutions for expense tracking, and bank reconciliation. So there's some very, again, it's a lot of these are getting built into the SaaS products, the accounting products themselves. So like the Zeros and the Bright Accounting and Sages, where they're starting to offer as either an add-on package built in, where they'll track, or sorry, they'll help you categorize expenses and stuff like that. But I think those two, invoice management, like if you need assistance with chasing in particular for
Yeah.
inventory management, and then if you're, let's say if you're more mature, I'd say look at, I mentioned it before, but look at fraud detection. I think that's because that's a logical place. If you're starting to walk, like, you need to look at automating aspects of auditing your transactions. And then again, you're not on the call, but for those of you that are running, start developing your own web services and tools to manually train your own models to detect fraud detection, or to detect anomalous transactions and stuff like that. That's like the banks
Yeah.
themselves that are doing that stuff.
And Rick, you make such a good point there, about you've listed a couple of different tools to look at, but it's really worth mentioning as well that not all tools are built the same. And some people may have used different iterations of some of those tools at their early stages. And you mentioned a couple of different ones that are sort of at the fast moving in terms of adopting technology, and others that are slow moving in terms of adopting automation. And I think it's about really, when you go to look at this, particularly from your finance point of view, because that's where that's our vertical. We have a lot of experience in bringing in innovation, digitalization, and automation into the finance function, and not all tools are built the same. They're looking at a software and looking at the add-ons that are available to that software, and the cost of those add-ons should be weighed up versus just bringing in an automation tool that may be limited in its functionality to your current finance system, for example. So it's definitely worth looking at for sure.
Yeah, and just like we were saying earlier, if you're not sure, you can pick up the phone, because there's ways to do a technical vendor assessment where, like, again, it's contextual to what business needs are and what the goals of the business are, and then the near and long term. But there are people that can advise on things like that. So yeah.
Great. And Rick, you're one of them. So yeah, we're very lucky to have you here as head of digital transformation at Kenor. But if anyone that's on the webinar today is interested in booking a discovery call with Rick, we'd only be delighted to support that as well. So to see if he can support you and give you some strategic direction for your business as well.
Brilliant. If you want to contact myself, joanna@kenor.com, that I can arrange that for you. But I think that's everything for today. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. I hope you found today's session helpful and that you have some new ideas that you can put into action in your business. Just a reminder that this is a limited series, and the next session will be avoiding compliance pitfalls. So keep an eye out for that. That's in the 24th of September. If you have any further questions, or as Christina mentioned, wants to hear more about how even Rick can support or advise you in your business, do get in touch. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll look forward to catching you in the next session.
Thanks so much,
Let's
everyone.
do it again soon. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.